Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Pagey, here once again with another video on this upcoming DCU from James Gunn. So we are only like, I think, 2 weeks, or just under 2 weeks, I think, or something. Anyway, roughly, from this point, at the very least, away from the commencement of the DCU, which originally Gunn did label this as a soft entry into the DCU with the project that's coming, but I think over the past month, especially, even arguably the past 2 weeks or just the past week, Gunn seems to be making the show of Creature Commandos, which is kicking it all off, a bigger deal than he was previously. And this might just be an effort to advertise the show more, which makes a lot of sense, and you wouldn't blame him at all for that. But it also would be weird if the show had nothing of note going forward in regards, not saying that the show itself isn't worth watching, but the show doesn't have some little seeds or something planted for stuff coming forward in the DCU, whether they're big or small going forward. So while it is weird starting a universe that will probably have 90% of its projects be in live action, with a good majority of those being in the, in the theaters as a movie, it's a bit weird to start in the animated world, isn't it? Especially when it's also an adult animated show. There's gore, there's going to be nudity, you'd assume swearing along with that as well. So it's a bit of a weird start. But I also don't think, even though it's a bit of it's like a niche of a niche product, it also doesn't hurt or damage, I think, much saying it's the kickoff point. At least in my opinion. Sure, not as many people will watch it compared to a movie, a live action show, a non-adult show. But if it's good and a good starting point, then that is what it is. It's a good show, and it's a good starting off point for the new universe going forward, regardless of who will or won't watch it or who can and cannot watch it based off their age. But in the lead up to Creature Commandos coming out, we did have James Gunn sit down and answer a variety of questions about Creature Commandos with a couple of different outlets. But more importantly, going forward, he did talk about the rest of the DCU projects, whether it's projects already announced, some of which have already filmed, or unannounced projects coming up. So that's what we're going to be going over in this video. But of course, throughout the video, be sure to let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions and all the stuff we go over. What catches your attention the most? What do you think is the most of note? Let me know. And of course, if you're going to enjoy the video, I want to show support, drop a like. Takes 2 seconds. So I'm pretty much just going to break these down into like subjects, which was around the question. So it won't actually involve the question. It's just like the topic of the question, if that makes sense. So let's just start it off. So the first thing that was brought up, or the first thing I'm going to bring up here, is Gunn's next project in the DCU, because that has been a topic of debate and stuff. It's like, okay, well, he's done Superman, done arguably one of the biggest, or at least top 3 biggest movies in that first chapter that's coming out or coming our way. So what would he attack next? Would he jump into something else that's really big? Or would he go do one of the smaller projects? What's going on? Well, he said this: I have like 4 different things I could do. I'm going to jump from one to the other. I'll see which one really appeals to me, and that's the one I'm going to direct. So when he says I'm going to jump, it means that he's going to be involved in development, talking back and forth, I guess with like his creative people and that, like sort of like, I think, was it the architects or whatever he called it? Just going back and forth and seeing what ideas they have. Because Gunn, I think if whatever project he does next, he will write and direct it. You don't really see Gunn direct stuff that he hasn't written. Like, it just doesn't really happen. So I think if whatever he's going to direct, whatever movie it might be, he's going to write it. So it's not going to be something that's already got a screenwriter attached to it, like Teen Titans and stuff. I don't think he would do that, because I would be surprised at the very least. But if I had to make a guess, I mean, the easiest one to guess, just because it makes the most sense, and I think it would be a challenge for Gunn to do it. Not necessarily making the movie, though, that's always going to be a challenge, but I think just the after effects of it, like getting people to go watch it in the theater. Because Superman is Superman. Like, people aren't going to see Superman because it's made by James Gunn. People are going to see Superman because it's goddamn Superman. That's why they're going to see it. Or at least that's what like 98% of people are going to be doing. So I could see him doing The Authority. I think it's the one that makes the most sense. Superman's meant to set it up to a degree. It makes the most sense. That's what he would jump into. And I don't think we have a screenwriter for that's attached to it. And of course, there's no director at this point. So The Authority we know is coming. It seems like that's the one that he would do. And it's also like a group movie as well, which is Gunn's expertise. Like, him doing Superman is sort of going against what we're used to when he does the comic book stuff, because all of his other stuff is group stuff. Even Peacemaker, it's called Peacemaker, but it's Peacemaker and Friends. And I'm sure Superman's going to have an aspect of that, because we know like Green Lantern and stuff and everything like that. But The Authority just seems like the one that he would do. The next topic was on the importance of scripts. And this is what Gunn said. He said, One thing I've tried to make clear to people from the beginning is that everything at DC is going to be writer driven. Until we have a script that I'm totally happy with, that movie is not going to get made, no matter what it is. And I think this is a good philosophy or good ideology to be, basing everything off, but you're not going to be perfect with that. There's always going to be something that might be slightly underwritten. I think especially when it comes to maybe things like the TV shows, because they might be like, oh, we're going to be changing up as we go. And that's fine as long as you're not just writing it literally like an hour before you film the goddamn scene. But we know that he's got like a couple of different writers like that are writing like a couple of different projects and stuff like that. So it's not like there's going to be like, oh, there's 20 projects and there's 20 individual writers. Like if there's 20 projects, there might be like, I don't know, like 8 to 10 or something like that across the board, maybe even less. And there hasn't been obviously a project as of yet that's had the question mark in regards to its like legitimacy based off like, is the script even good because it's been delayed? I know people would jump at Batman Brave and the Bold, but I think that's more due to the fact that Andy Muschietti has been busy since he finished The Flash and he's still on that movie. So now I think that movie is going to start moving forward a bit heavier and like, I guess, in the remainder of this year, which is only a month and a tiny bit, but obviously like the first half of next year. Like I think Batman Brave and the Bold probably starts filming beginning of 2026, like in the first half there of 2026, and most of next year will be that development stage. So I know people won't like that, where like, oh well, if something's like not perfect in James Gunn's eyes, then it won't get moving. But I mean, he's the creative head of that studio, so what he says goes. But speaking of the DCU, he did talk about the philosophy of the DCU, and he said, I truly believe that if we tell good, authentic stories, whether or not they make a successful movie, but if we maintain the same philosophy, we will build a universe that people will love and want to be a part of for a long time. And that's fair, I guess, but it also, like, I think people want just to be engaged in your universe. They want consistency in the universe. And that's the thing. You just want people to be looking forward to something, and that's always the difficult thing. You can make something that's a solid movie, but if not enough people see it, the less people are engaged, and you have to have like that, the snowball rolling down the hill, gaining momentum, building size, and everything like that. So, like, I think most people's fingers are crossed that Superman is like whatever with Creature Commandos, because it's already, as I said, like a niche of a niche on a streaming service. So it's not, I don't think anyone's expecting that to be like this, record breaking show. But with Superman, you just hope that it has a decent opening, a decent start, and it's enough to build a base from. Because if that doesn't happen, then I think alarm bells will be ringing. But if it's good, then maybe it's one of those things where it then catches momentum once we get to like the second, third, fourth, fifth project and stuff like that. But on the DCU projects, he did talk about R-rated DCU projects because people are very curious. And of course, this ties back into the fact that, Creature Commandos is R-rated. And he said, if a story is going to be R-rated, we're totally fine with that. Whatever's worthwhile in the story, that's what we're going to do. Now, I know what they're going to do. I think in regards to I was going to say 9 out of 10, but I'd say even maybe like 49 out of 50 cases. Anything that's going to the theater, anything that, you pay nowadays it's like $20 for a ticket. God, that's ridiculous. But anyway, $20 for a ticket, you get your popcorn, you get your little box of chocolate or whatever it is, and you go in. That's not going to be R-rated most of the time, like 90 to 95% of the time. That's going to be, doesn't mean there's not mature themes in there, but it's not R-rated. You can still, a kid can go. A kid under the age of 15 or 14 or whatever it is can just go on their own. They don't need a mature, guardian or whatever to see it with them. But the streaming side, especially the stuff specifically going to HBO, I think that's going to be like, I don't know, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be R-rated and it's going to have gore and all this stuff going on, but it's going to have more mature themes and stuff like that, because a lot of the times that's the head audience that's there. So I think that's pretty much what it's going to be. And I think if you hooked Gun up to a lie machine or a lie detector, might I say, that would probably be the outcome. It's like, well, yeah. Like most of the stuff going to the theaters, like 90-95%, it's going to be for families, because at the end of the day, it's goddamn comic books, it's goddamn superheroes. It's targeted for kids. Like they're the heart of they're the core of the audience, and everything else spreads around it. So that will always be the target audience there, and you're never going to try and dismay or turn away your target audience, especially in the big moneymaker in the theaters. Now, this is a very interesting one that people were wondering around. That's the Canon of this DC. And specifically, first, he does talk about Peacemaker, and he says, the truth is that almost all of Peacemaker will be canon, with the exception of the Justice League, which means like the scene towards the end of the first season where the Justice League shows up and you do see Ezra Miller and Jason Momoa as the Flash and Aquaman. But he says, which we will cover in the next season of Peacemaker. Now, they could easily do something, because obviously if you've seen Peacemaker, you know at the end of Peacemaker, he's like seeing his dead dad. He's like, you know, having like visions, or not even visions, he's just like daydreaming like that his dad's there. So they could easily make it that he was doing that with the Justice League, but then you also have to explain why it's that version. You know, like I think they're going to play it for a joke. I think it'd be the way to do it in Peacemaker. It's going to be something that people try to break down too much, whether it's leading up to it or actually when we see it. I think they're going to play it for a joke. I would be surprised if Gunn spent too much time thinking of a really good explanation, because I don't think any explanation is going to be good enough, at least in regards to like people not breaking it down and saying as to whether it makes sense or not. So I think playing it as a joke, and maybe it's just like an unreliable storyteller through the eyes of Peacemaker, is probably the way to go. And that's honestly probably what I would do. But specifically in regards to the DCU as a whole going forward, specifically outside of Peacemaker, he says, nothing you see is really canon until you see it in Creature Commandos or later in the DCU. Now, in Creature Commandos, you'll hear things that happened in Peacemaker or the Suicide Squad. So that alone, at that point, it's automatically canon. The truth is, almost everything in Peacemaker will be canon, with the exception of the Justice League, which we said before, which is something we'll address and deal with in the next season. But really, the only thing that will be canon going forward is Creature Commandos, Superman, Peacemaker, Supergirl, and Green Lantern. That's just because those are the announced projects that are in development and about to be filmed or have already been filmed. So, yeah, I know I think the universe is always going to be a bit messy at the beginning, because it's going to have those dregs, you know, floating at the bottom of the glass from the previous DCU, like the Suicide Squad, like Peacemaker, and like that's always going to be there. Though I think the only character that was a main thing in the DCU that's really going to continue over, that wasn't originally James Gunn related, is Amanda Waller. Like, sure, there's still the thing of like, is Margot Robbie returning as Harley Quinn and stuff like that, but we know Waller is showing up. Waller's going to be in Creature Commandos. She's probably going to be in Peacemaker season 2. She's getting her own show called Waller. So she's probably maybe the biggest issue, if you really want to call it an issue. But it's just how you treat the universe. Like, if you just don't even like hint at it and you just move forward, you're not dwelling in the past, both in the show and outside of the show, then it probably won't be too much of an issue. But it's always going to be this, you know, the cherry picking thing, which is, I guess, a valid conversation, because if you're going to do a reboot, go full on with it. But Gunn was never going to like ditch some of these characters, which he'd hired his friends to be in, you know? So I understand why he really fought to... Well, I don't think he really had to fight, but he's the guy in charge. So I can understand why he did that. I think most people would if they really loved the thing that they'd done. Now, he was asked about when Lanterns will be released relating to Supergirl, seeing that they're going to be filming around the same time, and we have the release date for Supergirl already, which is June 2026, essentially a year after Superman. He said, we'll see when it comes out, but they're coming out more or less at the same time. Now, I would assume you would think that Supergirl comes out before Lanterns, just because we have a release date, but he was asked about the timeline of the DCU projects, and this is how he said them. So it's fine for the first 3, and then there's a bit of a swap. So he says it's Creature Commandos, Superman, Peacemaker, Lanterns, and Supergirl. Now, he might have misspoken, but they were asking me about like the chronological timeline in regards to like when they take place in the universe. So by that, should we assume that Lanterns comes out before Supergirl? But they don't have a release date. It's also really tricky with a TV show, because you don't know some of the complications you might have, and also where HBO wants to fit in its schedule. Because at the end of the day, they don't know what HBO is going to have specifically at that point in time in that calendar, and when's a good time to premiere a TV show as well. So it would be a very interesting thing if Lanterns premiered after Supergirl. So Supergirl comes out in theaters in June, and Lanterns comes out in August or September or something like that on HBO, but the story of Lanterns is set before Supergirl. That will be interesting. But then again, Supergirl is adapting that Woman of Tomorrow storyline, which is set in space, so then maybe again it doesn't really matter too much. So I don't know. But one character we've only like briefly mentioned, which is the Batman. James Gunn was asked about the state of Batman projects just as a whole at DC, and he says, right now, we're moving forward with Brave and the Bold, which is the Batman movie in the DCU. That's happening right now. And Matt, as in Matt Reeves, is writing the Batman 2, and that's happening right now. Now, there was something that came out where, like, the Batman Part 2 might not even start filming by next year, just because there's, I think, just some logistical stuff going on. I'm not too sure. Like, I'm sort of over the Batman stuff. I love the Batman stuff, I like most of the Batman stuff, but like I'm looking forward to seeing some characters that just don't get more appreciation, especially in the cinematic world from DC. So whether that is the Green Lantern stuff, like I'm looking forward to some of the more niche stuff as well. So yeah, if Batman's there, I'll watch it, but I'm not necessarily like praying to the DC Lord saying, please give me more Batman stuff. And the second last thing to talk about is lands. This was Gunn talking about lands. He actually goes pretty in depth. So he says, the truth is that Chris Mundy, Tom King, and Damon Lindelof, or the producers and writers, wrote an incredible show. I'm so excited for people to see it. It's very realistic, very believable, very real, the kind of things you would never think would be true in a Green Lantern TV show. And very human and adult and wonderful. And the story that they wrote suited a couple of actors who were those ages, and that's why they cast those actors. Those were their choices. I totally supported them. I love them. I'm so excited for people to see what these guys have accomplished, but it's all in service of the story. The story always comes first. The scripts always come first, and we would never be making the show if Chris and the guys hadn't come up with wonderful, beautiful scripts. It's very earthy, very believable, very real, the kind of thing you never think would be true on a Green Lantern TV show, and very human and adult and wonderful. So he sort of repeats some of the stuff that he said previously. Now, I'm going to leave this till the show comes out. I know that's such a sit on the fence comment, like make a choice now. I don't necessarily like too much that there's such an emphasis on it being this believable, real thing when it's space cops with light up rings. Like, that's what Green Lantern is, But I think a lot of people think there's not going to be any space. I think there's going to be space. Now, I just don't think there's going to be cosmic based. Clearly, I think it just depends, like the tone of it and stuff like that. Does it almost feel like it was another show and they just slapped a Green Lantern label on it and it wasn't from the core Green Lantern show? Because that's always something that can be very frustrating, and you can see it in a lot of superhero or comic book projects, is that someone else had a story, they were shopping it around, and someone was like, hold on, we could probably just do this and just slap a franchise on it and make the show around that. I don't think Lanterns is exactly that, but it seems like some of the themes might. So it's one of those things I just want to wait and see what the show's like. I really like Damon Lindelof. I haven't watched Ozark, and I know that's what Chris Mundy's from. He's the lead dude. He's the lead dude out of the three running the show. But with Damon Lindelof's influence on the show, and I know he's a Green Lantern fan as well, Damon Lindelof, which gives me a bit of like more faith, I guess, in regards to what's happening here, though he isn't the main guy behind it. But Damon Lindelof stuff is like, whether it is Watchmen, whether it's, The Leftovers, it's Lost, whatever it is, a lot of his stuff is really good. So that gives me a lot of faith. And like Tom King as a comic writer, he's very hit or miss. I know a lot of people weren't happy that he was in James Gunn's Architect Room. I didn't really care too much because at the end of the day, it's just, I want to see what it's like when it's a movie or a TV show, when he's just a comic dude previously. So that's a wait and see in regards to whether I judge that, because people can be different in mediums or different in different mediums. So yeah, I just want to wait and see, because there's some stuff that worries me, but then there's some stuff that sounds really interesting about Lands. But it doesn't sound like a home run at the moment, but that's for me to wait until there's a trailer. And the final thing to talk about is the world of the DCU, and specifically metahumans. So Gunn talked about this, and he said that one of the important things is that in Superman, and pretty much since the beginning of the DCU, there have already been heroes and metahumans. People already know the origin of, Superman and superheroes and stuff like that. But in the present of the DCU, there are many more metahuman people, and that is a bigger problem today than before. Now, apparently in Creature Commandos, we're going to see, I think flashbacks with G.I. Robot, or a backstory there where we'll see some, metahumans in the 40s or I think the 40s, because I think G.I. Robot's meant to have fought in World War II. I guess late 30s, early 40s, or late 30s to early and mid 40s. And maybe even Vietnam and stuff like that. So we'll see how many metahuman people there, what type of metahuman people. But it makes sort of more sense, or it makes a lot of sense, I guess, that there'd be a bigger problem today, just because whether it is the logical thing where, like, if a metahuman has a kid, that kid has a good chance of having powers as well. But just like in regards to like the growth of the population and stuff like that as well. But this sort of does tie into the whole like Kingdom Come influence or reverse Kingdom Come. Though I don't think it's like like in regards to like Superman and some of the earlier stories in this DCU, it feels like it's very Kingdom Come, you know, inspired and stuff. I know there's the whole thing of like it's like a complete reverse Kingdom Come. I don't think it's a complete reverse Kingdom Come. It's not like a 180 from what Kingdom Come is, but it's like a 150 to 145 degree flip, if that makes sense. But yeah, I think this is one thing you have to watch. Like, I'm sure Creature Commandos will touch on it, but Gunn has said there's going to be like projects set in the DCU, but like previous in the timeline, whether it is in the 40s, whether it's in the 50s, whether it's in the 80s and stuff. And that's where they can really hammer home some of those like existence of metahumans previously in this universe, which would be very interesting to see. It just depends like how often that is and the actual like attention to detail on that. Like, is it specifically set in the 80s and we're there the entire movie, or is it just like one scene in the 80s and you see something? You know, that's a wait and see, but we don't know exactly how that's going to happen, play out in this DCU. That's for us to wait and find out when the actual projects come out. But yeah, overall, I think this was a pretty good thing. I think I don't know if there was too much controversy around any of the stuff he said here. There might have been, just because it is the internet and people always go crazy over whether it's crazy positive or crazy negative over the tiniest little thing. I don't think there's anything groundbreaking in the stuff that was said here, but it just opened up, you know, I guess it opened your eyes up a bit in regards to how he's planning certain things, and that he's not going to necessarily rush, but he's also not going to like dawdle at the same time. But yeah, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, it'd be awesome if you could drop a like on it to show support. Let me know in the comment section down below your various opinions on everything we went over in this video. Always curious to hear what you guys are thinking. And of course, if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, and I'll catch you guys later. Goodbye.